Hey everyone, welcome back. In this video we are building a complete multi-step form using modern React, Tailwind CSS and DaisyUI. You will learn step-by-step validation, Framer Motion animations, local storage persistence, a beautiful progress tracker, and a celebratory confetti explosion at the end. So let's get started. Okay guys, so let's open our terminal and let's create a new React project using Vite, which is a modern fast-build tool that offers a great developer experience. So now let's write npm create Vite at latest, and I will write dot in the end so that no additional folders will be created and everything will be installed inside this folder. So let's press enter. Okay, let's select a framework, which will be React. Then let's select a variant and it will be JavaScript. Here I will say no and no again. Okay, now let's write npm install. Now that we have the basic React project ready, we will add Tailwind CSS for utility first styling. So let's visit the website. Okay, here let's click get started. And since we use Vite, we're in the right place, we can skip the first part because we have already done it. And now we need to install Tailwind CSS. So let's copy this and paste it in our terminal. Okay, now we need to configure the Vite plugin. Let's copy this and inside vite.config.js file, we need to make some changes. Let's paste this import right here, and inside plugins array, let's also use Tailwind CSS. Let's save this file. Okay. Now we need to add an import to our CSS file that will import Tailwind CSS. So let's copy this, and inside source folder, we can find a file called index.css. We can delete all these styles and paste this import. Okay. So that's it for our Tailwind CSS. And now we need to install DaisyUI, which is a component library built on top of Tailwind CSS. So it provides pre-styled components like buttons, cards, models, and more, helping us build the UI faster. Now let's click how to use, and we need to install DaisyUI as a node package. So here I will copy this command and let's paste it in our terminal. Okay, and now we need to add DaisyUI to our CSS file. So let's copy this plugin since we already have this import Tailwind CSS, and here let's paste this plugin and let's save this file. Okay, now we need to install Framer Motion and Confetti. So first of all, let's clear our terminal and let's write npm install Framer-Motion. So Framer Motion will provide powerful animation capabilities for React. We need it for animation, okay? And for the Confetti animation, we can write canvas-confetti. So let's install them. Okay. For now, let's close our terminal and we can delete assets folder, for example, we don't need it, and app.css file as well. And inside app.j6, we need to remove this boilerplate code. Okay, this is how app.j6 looks like. And now I'm gonna take this text and inside index.html, I want to change this default title with this text. Okay, so now let's open our terminal and write npm run dev to start our development server. So let's open this, and this is how it looks. As you can see, the background color is dark. It depends on your browser theme. So when you deal with DaisyUI, it looks at your browser theme. And since my browser theme is dark, here I also have this dark background color. But if my browser theme was light, here I would see a light background color. Okay, so now let's close index.css and focus on building our multi-step form. Okay, now inside source folder, let's create a new folder called components. And here let's create a new component called MultiStepForm. Okay, so let's save this file, and inside app.j6, we can render this multi-step form right here. So let's say multi-step form. Okay, and now let's work with our multi-step form component. And as you know, we need to have steps, and it will be responsible for total number of steps in our form. And we can say that it will be always constant. So we can say const total steps, and it will always be equal to 4 in our case. Okay, then we can create a state for our step. So let's say const step set step, and let's import use state from React for that. And by default, it will be equal to 0. Then we need to create a state for data. So it will store all user input values. So let's say const data set data will be equal to use state. And here we want to work with local storage. So let's say that here we need to do the following. We need to say json.parse local storage. And here when it comes to item name, let's say that we can say MultiStepForm dash data, or here we can have an object. But as you can see, it is inside quotes, and for now it is a string. So what this line does is that we first of all try to read saved string from browser storage, and its name is MultiStepForm data. For now, it doesn't have any data. We do it like beforehand. And since local storage only stores strings, we use json.parse to convert it to an object. Okay, as you can see, it converts a JavaScript object notation JSON string into an object. And if nothing is saved, getItem returns null, or here we have our string. And if we deal with this part, we will also convert it into an object. As I have said, json.parse will convert it to an object. So even though here we have quotes and it is a string, after json.parse happens, we will have an object. Okay, then let's create a state for our errors. So let's say const errors, and here we will also want to use an object. So it will keep track of errors for each field, for example, for email, for password, and so on. Then we need to create a state for like submitting. So let's say const submit. We can say submitting, set submitting. And by default, it will be false. So it will be true when user clicks submit. And we need it to show loading later. And then we can create a state for complete and set complete. So we need it to show like success overlay. So it will be true when form is finished. And we need to use it for success overlay and also for Confetti. Okay, so that's it for our states. And then whenever data changes, we want to save it to our local storage. For that, we can use useEffect hook. So let's say that we want to use useEffect. And when it comes to dependency array, here we have data. So whenever data changes, we want to save that data into our local storage. So every time data changes, we want to save it to local storage. So by doing this, we ensure that user progress is saved even if page refreshes. And when it comes to this JSON stringify, it converts a JavaScript value to a JavaScript object notation string. Okay? Okay, that is great, guys. And of course, also we need to have like validation so that we can prevent our user from going to places where he shouldn't go. Okay, so for that, we can create like reusable functions to check if user input is valid. So here, let's say that we want to define our validation. So let's say that here we will have validators object, and we want to create like small reusable functions. So let's say that here we will have a function called required, and here we will have value. So it will accept value. And if value is undefined, so let's say if value is undefined, or if value is null, or if value is an empty string, we want to return this string which will be required. Otherwise, we want to have an empty string. So it will be like our function for validation, and it will check if there is value or not. So if it is undefined, or if it is null, or an empty string, we will see this text. Otherwise, we will not see anything. Then we need to have validation for our email. So let's say that here we will have a function for our email, and also it will accept some value. And here actually we don't need to have these curly braces, and here we don't need it as well. And here we can just write a comma and remove this one. Okay, so we will accept this value, and then we need to like check whether it is valid email or not using regular expressions. So for that, we can write parentheses, then we can write our testing for like regular expression. So now I will type it and try to explain to you what it does. So let's accept it for now. So here we have regular expression, and this part stands for one or more non-white space characters, followed by this sign, followed by one or more non-white space characters, followed by dot, followed by one or more non-white space characters. And then here we have dot test value. So if value matches the regular expression that we have, this function will return true, and false if value doesn't match. Okay, and if everything is okay, we don't want to return anything, but if our matching doesn't happen, we can say invalid email. Then the last validation that we need to have is for password. So let's say minimum length, and here we can have length, then value, and we need to check if there is value and value.length is more or equal, is greater or equal length, then we don't want to show anything. Otherwise, we say must be at least this length characters. So as you can see, this is a function that returns another function. It means that it is high order function. And in our case, we will check for 8, like minimum length will be 8. So if a value's length is at least 8, we will have this string. Otherwise, we will see must be at least 8 characters. So that's it for our validators. So let's save this file. And actually here we need to have or. Okay, I didn't notice it, sorry. So we need to say or. So if value is undefined, or if value is null, or if value is an empty string, and it means that we need to remove this exclamation mark, and we can use like strict checking. Okay, so let's save this file. Oh, and here I also need to have these parentheses right here. So now it will be correct. Okay, again, let's go over this part again. So we try to read saved string from browser. So it will be like this, MultiStepForm data, and local storage only stores strings, and we use JSON.parse to convert it. So we use JSON.parse to convert it to an object. And if nothing is saved, getItem returns null. Okay, but in this part here, as you can see, we have object inside these quotes. And by doing this, we ensure that we will parse an empty object. And here we have use state, and it means that we ensure parsing runs only once, and it's like lazy initialization. So if nothing is saved, getItem returns null, and it means that here we will convert the string to an object, and we will have an object. So great, guys, now we have our validation, and we have our states, and we can save data into local storage whenever data changes. So now we need to create a function which will update data state. Okay, so let's say that we can create a function called handle change, and this function will accept two parameters, key and value, and then we can do the following. We can say set data, and we can say that here we will have the following. So here we say keep all the previous data as it is, and change the value of that key which is being passed to this function. So for example, if we have like field like email, it means that key will be email and value will be the value which is being passed to this function. So it means that we want to keep all the previous data as it is and change only the value of that key which is being passed to this function with the value which is also being passed to this function. Okay, I think that it is clear. And then when it comes to errors, we just want to clear error for that field. So let's say set errors, and we want to keep all the errors as they are and update only the error for that changed field. So here, for example, let's say that when I tried to go with my email, I got an error. But then again, I make some changes to my email input, and since key is email, the error will be gone, because in this case, I don't need to have any value. I just detect if some changing happens with my email field, with my email key, I want to reset its error. So that's what this function will be responsible for. Okay. Okay, guys. Now what I suggest to do is to create a function which will check if all fields in the current step are valid. So let's say const validate step, and here we can have s, which will be equal to step. So s is the step number to validate. If not provided, it defaults to the current step. Okay, so inside this function, and looks like we have an error here, because here we just need to have one sign which is like equal. So here, let's say const e will be equal to an empty object. So it will be for storing our error messages, an object to store our error messages. Then if we are at the first step, so let's say if step is 0, it means that like we count by 0. As you know, indexes in JavaScript are 0 based. So here we have 0, but it is the first step anyway. So we need to check if full name is empty, null, or undefined. For that, we can say e.fullname will be equal to this function. So as you can see, we refer to our required function. So we see validators.required, and we pass our full name, as you can see, and it checks if full name is empty. So if full name is empty, it means that we will see this text. It means that inside this e object, full name will have required next to it. Okay, e.fullname will be equal to required. Then we need to check if email is empty and if email format is valid. So let's say e.email will be equal to validators.required and then validators.email function. So first, validators.required returns required if the field is empty, or if not empty, validators.email checks the pattern. Okay, and if everything is fine, nothing. But if the email doesn't match our pattern, we will see invalid email. So that's it for our first step. Then at the second step, let's say if step is second, we need to check for if username is empty. So let's say e.username will be equal to validators.required data.username, and we can also check and see that minimum length will be 3, for example, using our function minimum length. So it will check if username is empty, and if it is empty, we will see required, and if not empty, it will check for minimum length. It should be minimum 3. Okay, then we need to do the same for our password. I mean, the logic will be the same. So as I said, minimum length will be 8. So first of all, we check if password is even provided, and if it is provided, then we check for minimum length. Okay, then we need to check for password confirmation. So if password matches, we need to do something. If passwords do not match, we need to do something. So let's say e password confirm. So let's say e password confirm will be equal to, and we need to do the following. We need to say data.password. If it is equal to data.password confirm, then we don't want to have any errors. Otherwise, we see passwords do not match. Okay, so that's it for this step. Then on our third step, so let's say if step is third, we need to check if user selected a plan. So let's say e.plan will be equal to validators.required data.plan. So it will be required if empty, and it will be empty if a user didn't select a plan. Okay, so after all these steps, we need to save errors in state. So let's say set errors e. Okay, and then we need to convert the errors object to an array of messages. So here we will return true if step is valid. Okay, and here we check that if every value is empty string, it means that it is true and everything is fine. So it will be true if no errors. But if any field has an error, it means that this step should be redone by a user. Okay guys, and now we need to create a function to be able to go next when we click a button and go back when we click a button again. So let's say const next, it will be our function, and we need to say if the step isn't valid. So let's say we need to use our function that we have just created, validate step, and we need to pass to it our step. So if here we have false, it means that our step isn't valid and we need to redo all the recommendations that we have to be able to go to the next step. So if current step is valid, only then we want to go to the next. Otherwise, we just want to return, and it means that nothing will happen. So if our step is valid, we can say set step, and we can use this math.min function. So math.min function ensures that we never go past the last step. So our total steps are 4. And so as you can see, total steps is equal to 4, and just a step is equal to 0 by default. So when step is 0, it means that we are on the first step. When step is 1 here, it means that we are on the second step. When step is 2, it means that we are on the third step. And when step is 3, it means that we are on the very last step, which is 4. And it means that this step should never go above 3, okay? Because we count starting from 0. And by doing this math.min, we just really ensure that we will never go past the last step, okay? So this function is responsible for that. And this function returns the smallest number out of 2 numbers. So as you can see, it returns the smaller of a set of supplied numeric expressions. So for example, if here, I just say that, just for example, if here we have 4 and if here we have 10, this function will return 4. And if here we have like 30 and here we have 40, it will return 30. So by doing this, we prevent going beyond the last step. You can do your own calculations, but I think that I already explained to you how it will be, okay? Then similarly, we need to do the logic for a case when we go back. So let's say const back, and here we don't need to check for validation, okay? We just do the same logic, and here it returns the larger of a set of supplied numeric expressions. So by doing this, we ensure that we never go below 0, which is the first step. So that's it for our next function and for our back function. Okay, and finally, we can create a submit function. So let's say that under this function, we want to create a function called submit, and we want to pretend that it will take some time. So we want to make it like asynchronous. We just pretend that it will take some time. So we make it to be asynchronous, and we need to validate current step. If current step isn't valid, we just want to return. And at the same time, we need to set submitting to be true. We need it for loading. Then let's say that we want to have try block, and here we imitate network delay. We simulate, okay? So here we say await new promise, resolve function, set timeout, resolve, and let's say that it will be for 800 milliseconds, for example, or 1 second, for example. So here we wait 1 second before calling resolve function, before finishing our network delay. And then we need to have Confetti effect. For that, we need to import Confetti. So here at the very top, let's say import Confetti from canvas Confetti, and we can remove this React because it isn't used, and by doing this, it looks much cleaner. So let's come here and let's say that here we want to have Confetti, okay? And we can specify that like how many particles we want to have. So particle count will be 100. So if we hover over, it says the number of Confetti to launch. More is always fun, but be cool. There is a lot of math involved. Then spread. It will be for how wide Confetti spreads. We can say that it will be 70, and vertical starting position, we can say that it will be 0.6. So it is where to start firing Confetti from. Feel free to launch off screen if you would like. So that's it for our Confetti. And after Confetti, we can say set complete to be true. And after we submit, we can remove saved data from our local storage. And finally, we can say set submitting to be false so that our loading will finish. Okay, and then we will have one more function, one more final function, which will be called reset. So we will attach it to a button. So when we click that button, we want to reset everything. So let's say reset form, and here let's say set data to be an empty object again, and then we can say set step to be the first step again. And we want to remove our data from our local storage. So we want to clear our local storage. Okay, that is great. So let's save this file. And finally, let's come back to our layout and do something. First of all, let's say that to this div, I want to apply the following styles. Let's say that min height will be screen. And let's say that we want to apply flex, items to be center, justified to be center, padding to be 6. So if I save now, this text will be in this center. So let's save this file. And as you can see, here it is. And we add padding so that we'll have some space. After that, let's say that we want to remove this text and we want to have a div. And to this div, we can see that width will be full and max width will be 3XL, which is 768 pixels. And we can give some border and round it will be XL. So let's save this file. Yeah, this is how it looks because there is nothing in it. Then we can see that we will have a div, and to this div we can apply the following classes. We can see that it will be card. It is a class that comes from DaisyUI. So if I hover over, as you can see, it comes from DaisyUI, and you can see all these styles which DaisyUI provides, which is great. And we can give some shadow, I believe. So let's see, that shadow will be XL. And since we have card inside, we need to have card body. And let's say that here padding will be 6, for example. So let's close this div, okay? And we can specify and save that on medium screens and higher padding will be 10, for example. So this is our body, and we can now work with like header. So let's create a div, and here let's create h2 tag, and let's say create account. So let's save this file. Yeah, now it looks really nice. So to this h2 we can apply the following styles. Let's say that text will be 2XL, and on medium screens and higher text will be 3XL, font will be bold, and margin bottom will be 2, because under this h2 tag we want to have a p tag, and let's say a modern MultiStepForm with validation, animations, and Confetti. Okay, and here we can write a dot, and to this p tag let's apply the following styles. Let's say that text will be small and text color will be gray 300. Great. And to make it clear, let's say that here I will write a comment and I will say header. Okay, and now under this like header we need to have progress bar. So let's say that here I will create a comment and I will say progress bar, and inside components let's create a new component called progress.jsx. Okay, so let's save this file, and inside app.jsx, I mean inside MultiStepForm, let's render our progress component. So let's say progress, and we need to pass to it our step. So let's say step will be equal to step. So let's save this file, and inside progress let's accept it, and we need to define step titles, like it is personal, account, preferences, and so on. So here let's say const step titles will be equal to, so let's accept it, and here I will say personal, then account, then preferences, and summary. Okay, and let's say that here we want to return an ordered list, and we can apply the following classes from DaisyUI, which will be steps. So if we hover over, it will be like this, and steps will be horizontal, and width will be full, and we can give some margin bottom, which will be 4. So this is how steps component looks like on DaisyUI. So as you can see, first of all, we need to say steps. It will be container of multiple step nodes, and step, which is a single step node. And this is how a horizontal one will look like, and we're gonna use it. And this is how a vertical one will look like, and other ones. And here, as you can see, we say steps, and then we say step, primary, like for the color, and so on. Yeah, and I believe that by default it is already horizontal, so it means that we can remove horizontal class. Yeah. So here, I think that for now we can leave it, and then maybe we will remove it. Now we need to loop through our step titles. So let's say step titles.map. Here we will have title and index. And now let's say that we want to have li tags, and each li should have a unique key, and we can use index for that, or we can also use title for that, because titles are also unique. Then when it comes to class name, let's say that here we will have class name. So when it comes to class name, we need to use backticks and curly braces, and we need to say that it will be a step, a class from DaisyUI, okay? And then we need to use a $, and we need to say if index is less or equal to step, we want to say that it will be primary. Otherwise, we don't want to apply anything. So let's say that we are on the second step. It means that second step and first step will be primary because we have already done them, okay? And third and fourth steps, we don't want to apply any styles to them, okay? So that's it. So if index is 0, and if 0 is less or equal, also 0, for example, then that step will be primary. Then if index is 1 and step is also 1, it means that that step will also be primary, and so on. And if index, for example, is 3 and step is only 1, it means that no additional styles will be applied. Okay, so here let's say that we want to show our title. So let's save this file, and this is how it looks. And I believe that if we remove horizontal, yeah, it is still like that. Okay, and also we can say that text will be XS, okay, and on smaller screens and higher, text will be small. So by default, text will be extra small, and on smaller screens and higher, it will be small. Okay, it looks nice, but if I click, nothing is happening, and it isn't supposed to be like that. That is great, guys. And also, we can see that, for example, we can apply, for example, this color, let's say step, success, and it will be like green, as you can see. You can specify it the way you want, but maybe if I take this class and replace it with this one, how it's gonna look like. It also looks nice, but anyway, I will leave it as it is. Okay, so that's it for our progress component, and I want to remove this import since it's not used. That's it for our progress component, and now we should be focusing on our steps like personal step, account step, and so on. So now what I suggest to do is to create, like, we need to define steps. But first of all, let's create those components. So let's create a component called step personal. Okay. Then step account. Okay. Then step preferences. Okay. And finally, step summary. Great. Now inside MultiStepForm component, under this resetForm function, we can define steps using array. So let's say const steps will represent an array of objects. And here let's say ID, and it will be like personal. Then for the title, I will say just personal. And for the component that we want to render, we can say step personal, but first of all, we need to import it. Yeah. And we need to pass to it data, errors, and on change, we want to pass handle change function. And the same should be done for the other components. So this is how our steps array looks like. As you can see, here we pass data, errors, and on change to step personal, the same for step account, the same for step preferences, and on the last step, when it comes to step summary, we just pass the data object. And we have an error because we need to import those components. So let's import step personal and all the other steps. So let's save this file. And we have the error. Let's just say that here we want to have step personal from components, or we can do it not from components. Yeah, from components, but we are on the same level as MultiStepForm, so we can do it like this. Okay, let's accept it. Okay, that is great. So now what we need to do next is that under this progress bar, we need to show step content with animation. So let's see, step content with animation. For that, of course, we need to use Framer Motion. So first of all, let's import motion from Framer Motion, which is animation library for smooth animations. Okay, so first of all, let's create a container for our animations. So let's see that we will have a div, and to this div we can apply the following styles. Let's say that it will be relative and mean height will be 80, which is 320 pixels. Then we can use a component called animate presence from DaisyUI. So let's see, animate presence, from Framer Motion, of course. Let's make sure that we have imported it. Yes. So animate presence allows components to animate when they are added or removed from the DOM. And we can give to this animate presence a mode, and we can see that it will be wait, and it means that we ensure that only one child is visible at a time, and we wait for exit animation to finish before entering the next. Here let's say that we want to have a motion.div, so it is a div with animation capabilities. Then here we can see that we want to have a key, and when it comes to key, we can refer to our array, and we can say steps at step.id, so it is unique. The key tells React and Framer Motion that a new element has appeared, so they can run the correct enter and exit animations. Then we can say initial, and finally we can start working with these animations. So let's say that when it is initial, we can say that opacity will be 0 and x will be 30. So what does initial mean? So it means that it is starting state when the component just enters, and opacity 0 means that it is invisible at first, and x30, it's like slightly shifted right, okay, to 30 pixels. Then we can see that when it comes to animate, so first of all, let's put initial here, and let's format them. Okay, then when it comes to animate, we can see that opacity will be 1 and x will be 0. So it will be it's like a target state after animation runs. Opacity 1 means that it is fully visible, and x to be 0, we just move to the original position. Then when it comes to exit, we can accept it, and for now let's remove this transition, and looks like we have an error because we need to remove this div and this one. So exit is a state when component leaves, and we make opacity to be 0 again, so it's like fades out, and x to be minus 30, like it moves slightly to the left. Okay, and we can specify how long the transition will be, and let's see 0.4 for example. It is responsible for how long the transition will be. Then we need to render the component for the current step. So let's say steps at step.component. So let's save this file. And as you can see, with some animation, we have step personal. Now, if I refresh the page, as you can see, we have some beautiful animation. Okay, I like it. So now let's work with our step personal component. So let's open it, and we can remove this import, which is not used. And as you remember, we passed to this component data, onChange function, and errors. So let's accept them. And then we can do the following. We can remove this text, and we can say that here we will have a div, and inside this div we want to have a label. So let's say that we will have a label, and we want to say full name. So this label will be for full name, and when it comes to styles, let's say that it will be label. It is a class from DaisyUI, and we can give some margin bottom, which will be 1. Under this label, we can have input. So here, let's say that type will be text, and we can give some styles. Let's say that in this case, we also need to use curly braces and backticks. So first of all, we can see that it will be input a class from DaisyUI, then width will be full, and then we can say that we want to use $sign, and we need to be inside these backticks. So let's say that we want to use $sign, and we need to say if errors contain full name, we need to apply a special class. So let's say if errors contains full name, then we can apply this class, which will be input-error. Otherwise, we don't want to apply anything. Okay. When it comes to value, we can see that it will be either equal to data.fullname or an empty string. And on change, we can see that we can get access to this event object, and then we can call our function, which is being passed to this step personal component, and we can see that we need to specify the field, which is full name, and we can say that the value will be event.target.value, right? So here we provide key and value. And inside MultiStepForm component, as you remember, we have this handle change. It accepts key and value, and it keeps all the previous data as it is and changes the value of the key, which is being passed to this function, which is full name in our case. And it changes its value with the value which is also being passed to this function, which is event.target.value in this case. And it just updates this data object with the data that we pass to it. Okay, so now let's save this file. And as you can see here, we have full name, and this is how our input looks like. Now let's say that for full name, I will say something like Martin. And now if I refresh the page, the name is still here because we handled that inside MultiStepForm component. So let's say that I want to remove this name, and to make it clear, we can have a placeholder, and we can say, for example, Jane Doe, like a placeholder. Great. So under this input, we can see that if there is an error, we can show it. So let's say if there is an error, we can show it. Great. Then under this div, we can create another div, and again, we can have the label, and its text will be just like email. Then again, we need to have input. Its type will be email. And when it comes to placeholder, let's say jane@example.com, and let's close this input tag. And if we have some error related to the email, we can also show it. So let's make sure that everything is correct here. Yeah. So let's save this file, and this is how it looks. Great. So to have some space between the divs to this div, which contains all the divs, we can say space vertical, which will be 4. Great. Also, if you don't like this color, you can come to this input and you can specify that input will be -success, and it will be green, and this is how it's gonna look like. Okay, but I will leave it as default. So that's it for our email. And then also we can specify a field for like short biography, like, okay, so let's say a div. Here we will say not phone number, but like short biography. And actually we need to have this text inside text area. And here we will just say about, and it will be like optional. Okay, so under this label, we want to have text area, and we can accept it, I believe. And for the placeholder, we can just say short bio. So let's save this file, and this is how it looks. It looks really nice, and I like it. So let's try to type something. Okay, and now we need to have buttons. So when we click those buttons, we will see if our provided data are correct or not. So we will see our validations in action. Okay, so that's it, I believe. And also when it comes to text area, we can see that rows will be 4, and we can also specify like maximum length. Let's say that it will be 200 and test. Or I think that even 150 will be fine. And now we need to remove it, and let's try one more time. Yeah, 150, I think that it will be just fine. And in order to prevent a user from resizing this text area, we can come to these classes and we can say resize none. Okay, and a user cannot resize it. So let's refresh the page. Yeah, now it looks nice. Great. So it's up to you. And now I believe that everything is done for this component and we can move to the next one. But before, we need to implement buttons. Okay, so after this section, we can come here and we can say navigation buttons. So let's say navigation buttons. So here, let's say that we want to have a div, and to this div we can apply the following styles. Let's say that margin top will be 6, then it will be flex, items will be a center, justify will be between, and gap will be 3. Because inside this div we will have one more div. This div will contain a button, and here it will be for our button to be able to reset everything. So when we click this button, we want to call our function, which is reset form. And to this button, we can apply the following styles. Let's say that it will be button, and button will be secondary. So these are the classes that come from DaisyUI. Okay, after this div, we want to have another div, and we need to do the following. We need to say if step is greater than 0. Only in this case, we can say that we want to have a button to be able to go back. So when we click it, we want to call our function, which is back. And when it comes to styles, we can also apply these styles to this one. Okay, then we need to show the button to be able to go next. So for that, we can say if step is less than total steps minus 1. In that case, and only in that case, we can have our button, and here let's say next. And when it comes to styles, we can say button, and button will be primary. Okay, so let's save it. And this is how they look. Now if I try to click next, nothing is happening because here I need to say on click. I need to call a function which is called next. Okay, so let's save this file and try it one more time. Let's click next. And as you can see, we have invalid email. Let's try to make it valid. Okay, let's write some short biography. And now if I click next, as you can see, we have a beautiful animation and we are on the second step. That is really great, guys. If you are at this stage, congratulations, you have done a lot of great work. Now let's go to the previous step. And it looks really nice, guys. If I click next, as you can see, we need to have some space between these buttons. So let's say that to this div we can apply the following styles. Let's say that it will be flex, items will be center, justify will be end, and width will be full, and gap will be 3. Okay, now if I click reset, I am on the very first step, and I need to provide the names, the emails, and so on. Okay, so now let's provide some name. Let's see Jane at gmail.com, and something like I like reading books. So now let's click next. Looks nice. And then again, when it comes to buttons, we need to handle one more scenario. A scenario when a step is equal to total steps minus 1. And in this case, we need to do the following. We need to have a button, and depending on whether it is complete or not, we need to show some text. So let's say if complete is true, we need to show this text completed. Otherwise, if submitting is true, we need to show submitting. And if submitting isn't true, we need to show submit. Okay, I think that it is clear. So if complete is true, we show completed. If not, based on submitting, we show either submitting or submit. Then when it comes to styles, let's say that again we need to use curly braces and backticks. So let's say that it will be button will be primary, and then we need to have let's say a $sign. And if submitting is true, we just want to show loading, not button loading, just loading. Okay, and when we click, we want to call this function, which will be submit. And when will it be disabled? When it is either being submitting, being submitted or when it is complete. So that's it. So let's save this file. Okay. And also we can have like a small footer. So under this div, we can have a div and we can say footer tip. Oops, we need to use comments and let's say footer tip. So here, let's say that we will have some text, let's say tip, and we just can accept it. You can reset the form at any time by clicking the reset button. And let's apply some styles. Let's say that margin top will be 4, text will be extra small, and text color will be gray 500. So let's save this file. And as you can see, you can reset the form at any time by clicking the reset button. Let's see it on the bigger screen. Okay, so now if I refresh the page, I am on the first step. Now let's click next and I am here. Now let's go back. Okay, it looks nice. Okay, now let's work with our second step, which will be step account. Again, like inside step personal, we need to accept these data here. And let's remove this import, which is unused. Again, to this div, we can also say that we will have some space between the elements because inside this div, we're going to have several divs. So first of all, let's say that it will be a div and it will be for our username. So we can say that it will be label will be username. Then we can say that type will be text. Then again, we can accept these styles, this value, these change, and then we need to have placeholder. For the placeholder, we can say Jane do, for example. Okay, and under this input, we can say that if there is an error with our username, we can show it. And let's save this file and go to the second step. And this is how it looks. It looks really cool. Then under this div, we can have another div. So first of all, let's say that we want to use grid, and grid calls by default will be 1, but on medium screens and higher, grid columns will be 2, and gap between the elements will be 4. And here we will have a div, and we will have a label for our password, type will be password. Then when it comes to class name, we need to use, again, we can use that it will be input width will be full, and if errors contains our password, we can show this input error. Then for the value, let's say that we want to use data.password or an empty string. After, we need to say on change. Then on change, we pass our password, which is key, and the value which we typed. Then for the placeholder, we can use these stars. Okay, so let's save this file. Great. Then under this div, we need to have one more div to confirm our password, right? So let's say div. Here we can say that we want to confirm our password. Then when it comes to class name, let's use curly braces and backticks. And let's say if errors contains confirm password, we want to show this error. Value will be this. And on change, we pass confirm password key and the value that we type. And then for the placeholder, again, we can use these stars. Okay, great. And then if we have some error, we can say if errors contain confirm password, we can show this error. So let's save this file and let's try to do the following. First of all, I will write this username and I will try to click next. But I have this like error, meaning that I need to fill this field, okay? And actually I can show the error under this input. I can show errors.password like this, okay? So it will be like required, or you can remove it if you don't like. So let's create a password. I will make it to be short and it says must be at least 8 characters. So let's say that it will be at least 8 characters. Now I will click next again, and we should be asked to confirm our password, but nothing is happening. Okay, let's investigate this problem, because here we need to have password confirm. Everywhere we need to have password confirm. Okay, so let's save this file, and it says passwords do not match. I will make it like this, and again, it says do not match. Now they should be matched. Let's click next. and we are on the third step. That is great. Let's click. Okay, let's close this. Let's click back. Great. Now if I make username too short, it says must be at least 3 characters. Great. Now we are on the third step. So that's it for our step account component. Now let's work with our preferences component. Again, when it comes to this component, we need to destructure the same props. So let's say that we want to destructure them, then we can remove this unused import. And when it comes to step preferences, I have prepared some data that we want to show, like if you choose free option, like what features you're gonna get, and if you choose like pro option, what features you're gonna get, something like that. You will see it now. So let's paste it right here, and it will be an array. It is plans. So if you choose free, how the price will be, some description, if you choose pro, and if you choose enterprise. Okay, so to this div, let's say that we will have some space, and let's say that it will be 4. Then we want to have a div. Oops, let's say that we want to have a div, and here let's say select a plan. Then we need to loop through our plans. So let's accept it. Okay, here let's say that we want to render a div, and each div should have a unique key. In this case, we can use plan.id. And when we click a certain div, so here we have an error because let's just cut this and we need to have parentheses. But anyway, we have an error because we need to have one more div, I believe. Okay. Yeah. So now let's save that. For now, let's just write something like this and save this file so that it will be formatted and looks nice. So here we want to render the following. We want to have h3, and we can say plan.name. Then using a span tag, we can have plan.price. Okay. Then using a p tag, for example, we can have plan description. So let's say plan.description. And when we click this div, we need to say on click. We need to pass to our onChange function. So let's say onChange the key, which will be plan, and plan ID, meaning that we chose something, right? Then under the description, we need to loop through features. So let's say that under the description, we want to have an ordered list, and we need to loop through our features. Okay, and when it comes to styles, to this div, we can say that let's have a class name, and we want to use curly braces and backticks, and let's say that it will be border 2. So if we hover over, as you can see, width will be 2 pixels. Then let's say that it will be rounded large, padding will be 4, cursor will be pointer. Okay, and let's just accept it and see what we have. So now we didn't choose any option, but if I choose it, this is how it looks. It isn't what we need. Okay, so let's say that if data plan is equal to plan.id, we need to say that border will be primary and background color will be primary, like 10% of background color. Okay, and if it's not the case, border can remain gray 300, and when we hover, it can be 400. And to make it smooth, we can say transition all. So let's say transition all. So let's save this file. Yeah, looks nice, I believe. So let's choose this one, choose this one, and it looks nice. So now we can keep adding some styles. So first of all, instead of this select plan, let's say choose your plan. It will be label, margin bottom can be left as 1. And then when it comes to H3, let's say that it will be font bold and text will be large. Okay. Then when it comes to this price, let's say that text will be small and font will be semi-bold. And when it comes to this paragraph, let's say that text will be small and text color will be gray 600 and margin bottom will be 3. And when it comes to these unordered list, to these items, let's say that text will be extra small, and space between the items vertically will be 1. So let's save it. Yeah, but maybe we can remove this color. Okay, it can be left as it is. Yeah, I like it. So let's see it on bigger screens. Yeah, it looks nice. So let's click back. Let's click next. And it looks really great. Okay, guys. And then under this div, we can have a section for enabling notifications. So let's say that we want to have a div, and to this div we can say border top, and we can give some padding from top, which will be 4. And here, let's say that we want to have a paragraph, and we can say notification preferences. And to this paragraph, we can say that it will be margin bottom will be 3, and font will be medium, for example. Then let's say that we want to have a label, and inside this label, we want to have input. Its type should be checkbox. And when it comes to classes, let's say that it will be toggle, a class that comes from DaisyUI. And when it comes to size, let's say that toggle will be small. Then on change, let's say that on change, let's say that we can get access to this event object. And let's say that on change, let's say that we want to pass to our onChange function a key, which will be notifications and event.target.checked. And as for checked, let's say checked will be equal to, and here let's say data notifications. And as you can see here, I have 2 exclamation marks. So it is a JavaScript trick that turns any value into a true or false. So when it comes to checkbox, sometimes we can have an error from React about uncontrolled input. And to be able to prevent that, we can use this trick. So if data.notifications has a value like true or 1, the checkbox will be checked. And if it is false, null, or undefined, the checkbox will be unchecked. So by doing this, we ensure that React always gets a proper boolean, keeping the checkbox synced with our form state. I think that this moment is clear to you. And under this input, let's say that we can have a span tag. And here we can say receive email notifications about product updates and tips. And when it comes to the span, let's say that margin left will be 3, for example. So let's save this file. And this is how it looks. And I believe that to this label, we can say that it will be flex, items will be center, and cursor will be pointer. So I believe that we can give these styles. Okay, yeah, we can check it or uncheck it. Great. So let's see it on big screens. Yeah, this is how it looks. And I think that the text is too long. So I can say that we just want to remove this and tips part, and it will remain like this. Okay, it looks really nice, guys. And I believe that we can have this price and name in one line. So let's try to do it. So for that, let's cut these 2 elements and have them in one div. And let's paste it back. And to this div, let's say that it will be flex, justify will be between, items will be center, and margin bottom will be 2. So let's save it. And now I think that it looks better. And now if I click next, I am on the very last step. And if I click back, I am back here. And one more thing is that we need to have a place for our error in case if someone doesn't check this option, right? So for that, I believe that under this label, we can have the following. So if errors contain plum, we can have here a span tag, and we can show the actual error. And we need to remove this margin bottom, and let's try to do it again. Now I will reset the form. Now let's try to add some data. Let's give some username and passwords. So let's click next. Okay, and now, let's click OK. And now if I click next, as you can see, we have required. Oh, and I need to say that we can wrap these 2 inside a div. And to this div, we can say that it will be flex, justify will be between, and let's say that items will be center, and I believe that we can give some margin bottom, which will be 3. And now I think that it looks much better. Okay. So now even if I click next, I can't go to the last step. I need to choose an option. Let's click Pro and let's enable notifications and let's click next. So now we are on the very last step. So let's work with step summary component. Okay. Okay guys, and when it comes to this step summary component, here we only get access to this data that we get from our parent component. So when it comes to this div, we can see that here we will have h3 tag and let's say review. And to this h3 tag, let's say that text will be large, font will be semi-bold, and to this div, let's say that we can give some space vertically, which will be 4. And after this h3, let's say that we want to have a div, and to this div we can say that it will be grid and gap will be 2. Okay, so this is our review, and here we just need to show our data. So let's say that we will have a div, and to this div let's say that it will be flex and justify will be between. And when it comes to the data, we need to show full name and the actual full name like this, but we can do it a bit differently. Let's actually remove this colon, and inside this, and we want to have, for example, strong tag instead of span. Okay, and the same should be done for other elements, for email, then for username, and here we need to close this div, and also here we need to close this div. Then after username we need to display about plan. Okay, so here let's say that it will be equal to data.plan, and when it comes to email notifications we can just say on or off. So let's save this file, and this is how it looks. I really like how it looks. Okay, so now when we click submit, we need to show our Confetti. Okay, so for that, inside app.j6, I mean inside MultiStepForm, let's do the following. So now let's say that here we have success overlay. Okay, and for that, again, we need to have animate presence component from Framer Motion, and we need to show the motion div only when complete is true. Okay, so only when complete is true. Here we want to have a motion div, and we can say that initially opacity will be 0, but we need to have it right here. So initially opacity will be 0, but on animate opacity will be 1, on exit opacity again will be 0, and let's just accept it for now. But when it comes to styles, let's say that I want to remove all these classes, and let's say that it will be fixed and it will be inset 0. Inset 0 means that top will be 0, right, left, and bottom will also be 0. Background color will be black with some opacity. Let's say that it will be 30. Then it will be flex. Items will be center. And let's say that justify will be center. And padding will be 6. Okay. And we need to close this p tag. And inside this p tag, we can say the account, your account has been successfully created. You can now log in, or we can say your account has been successfully created. A confirmation email will follow shortly, or will be sent to this email, right? And here we have some error, as I see, because we need to take this. Yeah, that's it. Now we have fixed it. So this is the motion div, which will appear, but even inside this motion div, we can have another motion div. So it will be like outer motion, and for inner, like for inner overlay, we can create another motion div. So let's say motion.div. Okay, and to this motion, let's say that background color will be white and it will be rounded to XL. Padding will be 8, shadow will be XL, width will be full, max width will be medium, and text will be center. And let's say that initially it will appear like a bit smaller. So let's say initial scale will be 0.8, for example, but on animate scale will be 1. And then we can have a div, and here we can have a button. So let's just accept it. And when we click this button, we want to reset form, right? But not only we want to reset form, but we also want to set complete to be false. So for that, let's remove this reset form function and do the following. Here we just want to say set complete to be false and call reset form function. And here let's just have close text. So let's save this file and try it on bigger screen. So now we are at the very last stage. We confirm everything. Now let's click submit. As you saw, we have some loading, and this is how our text looks like, but we don't see it. Let's fix it. So for now, I will close it. And as you can see, the whole form is reset. Okay, so when it comes to paragraph, let's say that text will be gray 600. Okay, and here we want to have h3 tag, let's say. So now let's save this file and try one more time. So this is how it looks now. Let's click submit. Okay, but we don't see this text. Let's fix it. Let's say that text will be gray 800, for example. Okay, so that is great, guys. Now let's click close and everything is reset. Well, guys, looks like I found some small issue. When I click submit, as you can see, we have some like small text or something. We have some issue, as you can see. So to fix that, I found a solution to this problem. So let's come to our button. So this is how our button looks like right now, but I just found this solution and this way it looks even cleaner. So just take a look at it and nothing complicated. Okay. And now I need to uncomment it. So let's save this file and test it one more time. So now if we click submit, as you can see, we have only spinner. And after that, everything is fine. So now let's test it one more time. Here, let's say Frank, gmail.com, some biography. Let's say I like football. Click next. Here, let's say Frank1 and some password. Let's click next. Let's choose Pro option. Okay, let's click next again. And now let's click submit. And now let's close it. Okay, guys, that's it. Okay, guys, and the last but not least, maybe you want to save in local storage step as well. Because right now, so now if I refresh the page, as you can see, I am on the very first step again. Maybe you don't want to have this experience. Maybe you want to stay where you were. So we can do it as well. For that, we need to come to this step and we need to change it a little. Here, we also want to use local storage. So here, let's say that we want to try to get from local storage saved step, and let's just accept it. So it means that we try to get the previously saved step from local storage by saying const save step parse int. We convert a string to an integer. Okay, so it will be the name. So if save step isn't a number, so it can be either null, undefined, or invalid, we can default it to 0, for example. So again, here we try to get the previously saved step from local storage. Local storage stores everything as strings, as I said, so we need to convert it to a number. So that's why here I said 10. And if nothing is saved yet item returns null. So we can use 0 as a default, okay? And parse int can return not a number if the stored value is not a valid number. So here we have a return is not a number, and we check for that case. So we check if parse int sometimes can return none if the stored value isn't a valid number. So we check for that case. And if it is not a number, we default to 0. Otherwise, we just return saved step and we return the step that we actually need. Okay. Then we need to save the current step to local storage whenever it changes. For that, we can also have use effect. Okay. And here, let's say local storage dot set item. So here we can just say step.string to make it to be a string. And let's say that it should depend on a step. Okay. And then we also need to remove this item from local storage. So let's do it. So we need to remove it when we reset form. So let's say localStorage.remove item when we reset the form and when we submit it. Okay, so let's save this file and now let's test it. So now I will reset it, and now let's say David at gmail.com. I like swimming, for example. Now let's click next. And now if I refresh the page, as you can see, I am still where I was. So if you want this experience, you can have this. If you don't want to have this experience, you can remove it. Okay, I'm just showing you what else you can do with it. So now let's just keep adding it. And now let's confirm our password. Now let's click next. I will choose Pro. Let's click next. Here we have our data. Now let's click submit. And that's it. Now if I click close, I am on the very first step again. So that's it, guys. If you find this video helpful, please hit the like button and subscribe to this channel if you haven't done it yet. Thank you. I really appreciate it.